Brown is a Franciscan sister and executive director of New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light. Her life, rooted in her family's farm soil of Kansas, has led her on the path of caring for community and earth through working with and co-founding nonprofits including Tierra Madre, a straw bale sustainable and self-help housing project on the border of Sunland Park, New Mexico, and with others creating the Partnership for Earth Spirituality. Her passion is being a member of the Sacred Earth community.
Thank you, and it's my humble pleasure to be here today. So thank you very much for the invitation, and it's always a joy to work with you who are doing so many wonderful things here and inspiring many others throughout our community of Albuquerque and in the state of New Mexico. So thank you. I'd like to begin with a story. Some young students came to Rabbi Nachman and they said, "Rabbi, we are very puzzled. It says in the Talmud, the holy book, that we must thank God as much for the bad days as for the good. How can that be?" And the rabbi replied, "Go to Annapolis. Rabbi Zusha will have your answer." So the students undertook the journey. Arriving in Annapolis, they inquired for Rabbi Zusha. At last, they came to the poorest street in the city. There, crowded between two small houses, they found the worst tiny shack sagging with age. And when they entered, they saw Rabbi Zusha sitting at a bare table, reading a volume by the light of the only small window. "Welcome, strangers," he said. "Please pardon me for not getting up, but I have a very bad hurt leg. Would you like some food? I have some bread, and I even have some water." "No," said the students, "we have only come to ask you a question. Why do our sages tell us to thank God as much for the bad days as for the good?" And Rabbi Zusha laughed. "Me? I have no idea why that teacher would have you come to me." He shook his head in puzzlement. "You see, I have never had a bad day. Every day I have has been given to me and is filled with miracles." This simple story, I think, is very profound for us in this moment in time, especially as we face challenging economic times and as we increasingly face life on a diminished planet. I think it's particularly poignant today because I just read this morning that yesterday was rather a noteworthy day. We reached in our planet the place where we have 399.72 parts per million of CO2 emissions. Now, many of us are familiar with the organization 350.org, and we know that 350 is the optimal number of CO2 emissions on our planet for life as we've known it in all its wonder, beauty, caring, and community. In such a world, how can we find anything to be grateful for? In our world, how can we convey a message of love when we witness so much sorrow? In a world that seems to be crumbling before our very eyes, is there anything we can do to really make a difference? And what do we tell the children? As I prepared this sermon, the word remember kept coming to me. And I was recalling the anniversary of Cesar Chavez and also Martin Luther King's very historic prophetic letter from a Birmingham jail, which really has much wisdom for us today as we address and walk in the path of climate change. But I also remembered my mother, Sarah, a very simple woman on the farm, and her anniversary of passing, which will be 2 years this week. There is hardly a day that passes that I'm not grateful for her and think of her. And I remember her with great gratitude for her teaching me a joy in gardening and canning and cooking and appreciating the beauty of the earth and the sustenance of it. Very simple gifts that continue to nourish me. In such a fast-paced world, remembering, which comes from the Latin word memoire, which means to be mindful, is actually a very good part of any spiritual practice. If we do not remember, we forget who we are, our ancestry from the stars, and our swimming and flying brothers and sisters, and our families of origin, and our sacred traditions. And it's so important for children and young people to know their ancestry on all of these levels, to be rooted and to belong. Thomas Berry, Passionist priest and geologian, who passed over in June of 2009, helps us understand our ancestry in new ways as coming from being stardust. His greatest love and passion that motivated his work throughout his life were the children and the future. In Recovering a Sense of the Sacred, Conversations with Thomas Berry by Carolyn Tobin, she takes conversations she had with her dear friend over the last 10 years of his life. And in the last visit, which was in May, 1 month before he died, he was so determined and anxious to talk with her about what she and others needed to share with the children and the children of the future. And so what he recounts is a very tender and long litany that's quite beautiful. And I'd just like to read 2 from that litany. He said, "Tell them that the powerful, loving voice that spoke through every cosmic activity is speaking again, now through every voice on the earth. Voices who recognize that love, the earth, as their common origin, unifies all. In sacred, all opposites are reconciled." And this same loving voice is also speaking through every bird and leaf and star, and through the polar bear and the wolf and every threatened species, awakening humanity to see all living forms as a single sacred community that lives and dies together. We are all called to remember and awaken to see all living forms as a single sacred community. And this is a great challenge for each of us here. And for me, I find it a particular challenge working as the executive director of New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light, as I try and we try to engage communities and individuals in the greatest moral concern of our time, which is climate change. And part of the reason is there are so many moral issues that we are involved in, concerned about. And oftentimes, some of the other issues, and I think it was very interesting with the children, that many of them wanted to give the food, but to try to say, how can we make sure people aren't hungry, is more challenging, difficult, and somehow it isn't as immediate. It doesn't have the same kind of, what shall I say, rewards. Both are needed. But I think increasingly so with climate change and how we live on the earth, that's going to be affecting all of these other moral concerns. And sooner or later, we are being faced with it and need to address it. After working with all of this concerns for more than 20 years, I have come to believe, and it's sort of my New Year's resolution this year, and it's leading me to interesting places, that learning to love and be compassionate on ever deeper levels and guiding others into radical loving is the key. There's a story about the Catholic founder of Catholic worker movement, Dorothy Day, and it's similar to the conversion story of St. Francis of Assisi when he kissed the leopard. And it goes, one time a beggar woman with cancer of the face tried to kiss Dorothy Day's hand, and Dorothy commented, "The only thing I could do was kiss her dirty old face with the gaping hole in it where an eye and a nose had been. It sounds like a heroic deed, but it was not. What we avert our eyes from today, we can be born tomorrow when we have learned a little more about love. So maybe as we grow in radical love, we can face the extinctions of the species and dying of favorite trees and mountains in drought, and we will not avert our eyes from the brothers and sisters who are drowning from the hurricanes or starving from drought or devastated crops and empty wells. Maybe we can inspire the children with the growth of a new and radical loving being birthed within the human being and the human species, where we are doing new and creative things and that we are caring for each other at a deeper level. As Thomas said, the loving voice is also speaking through every bird, leaf, and star, and each of us. What we love is what we cherish, and it's what we work to keep. One of the current campaigns with New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light is gathering stories all across the state of what people love and how they see that being affected by climate change. And Marilyn is going to be in, I think, a room at a table afterwards, and I'd love to get more of your stories about that. And there'll also be some information about a wonderful camp that we're going to be having for youth this summer. That will be very inspiring. The stories we've collected so far, there's one that I'd like to share, or a couple. One was from a grandmother in Anthony, New Mexico, and she said she took a walk to the river. She's a fifth generation farm family, and she took a walk to the Rio Grande with her brother. And she said, "The only water I saw were the tears in my eyes as I looked at our Rio Grande that was just sand, and has been sand for the last year." Another young woman, though, from Albuquerque wrote about how she loves the forests and the rivers, and yet she's been increasingly disturbed by the fires. And she said, "I'm sad when I acknowledge that as a nation, we could reduce the causes of climate change, but that collectively we lack compassion and the courage to change. I work to transform the sadness and fear into compassion, into doing what I can to help our country make the shift to care for all of creation, so that we may collectively enjoy the fruits of this shift and gift the future generations a healthy planet that can sustain and support life that is joyous and safe." So in this last story, the writer talked about sadness and sometimes even feeling hopelessness. So there's another reflection on the word remember that came to me. And it is speaking the word as remember, or to recreate and transform that which needs healing, to remember the sacred earth community. And remembering can only happen because we have sat remembering or in mindfulness, like the meditation that your pastor so beautifully led you in this morning. And as we sit in that mindfulness, we are allowing the loving voice to infuse us with wisdom and to transform us so that we can be a different kind of member in the beloved sacred community. And to remember, assumes that we are not alone, but we are part of and that we belong to a miraculous community, amazing, miraculous every day, and created from stardust. And is this not what we want to and need to tell the children? By the choices that we make to live simply, and the voices that we use to change public policy. And you all here at First Unitarian are doing wonderful things and your new LEED certified sanctuary is a wonderful outward example, I believe, of the inner heart communal individual transformation that's happening among you. And it's a very powerful witness. So I thank you for that, and allowing that loving voice to speak in some new and creative ways. Young people often wonder about their purpose in life. What does it mean to be a human being? What am I to do with my life? And these are very important questions that are not just confronting young people, but they're also confronting us as we face the moral implications of climate change. Who are we? Who have we become? And who do we need to become as people of integrity? There's a very moving song that was written by John Aston, and the words were taken from Paramahansa Yogananda, and the song is called Love, Serve, and Remember. And it speaks of the deepest questions and longing. And the words to this song are, why have you come to earth? Do you remember? Why have you taken birth? Why have you come? To love, to serve, and remember. To love, to serve, remember. We're going to just try to sing this song, so bear with us just a minute. It's quite beautiful. I hope we can do it a little bit of justice. And I invite you to join us in with us on the lines to love, to serve, remember. Why have you come to earth? Do you remember? Why have you taken birth? Why have you come to love, to serve, remember, 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 to love. So, what do I, you, and we tell the children in our lives when they come with troubled hearts? What do we tell the children of the future whose heritage is a compromised natural world? Tell them you are sorry, that you did not know, and that you are working very hard now to create change. Tell them to remember that they are part of a long line of men and women who have heard a loving voice singing through trees and stars, coyotes, and still summer nights. Tell them to remember that they are not alone. They are part of an amazing, vast, sacred earth community of humans and worms and hummingbirds and whales. Tell them to remember that they are part of a loving wisdom, older than stardust, that pulses through their veins and will guide them through challenges and questions. Tell them to remember that they will be given many companions, including those who walk and fly and swim and crawl, who will work with them. Tell them that in the darkest moments reside luminous miracles to touch their hearts with gratefulness and wonder. Tell them to remember that they are loved beyond all imagining. And tell them to remember that their call is as vast as the heavens and as near as their heartbeat. To love, serve, remember.